Hey Blazor fans, welcome back to State Has Changed, your weekly news show and code demos. My name's Ed Charbonneau, and this week we've got some less exciting news. We had Blazor 0.6.0 ship last week, so this week we're kind of on the trailing edge of all the really exciting stuff, but I still found a few good tidbits for you guys. So let's get into some news and talk about what's happening in the community. Let's see what I've got up first here. My deck seems to be off. There we go. All right. So I talked a little bit about Bionic last week on the stream, and this is a project by Bruno Santos, and he's done a really good job with Bionic, but I wanted to bring it up again this week because he's moving some of his resources, but that's not really the news here. He wrote a really good article about why he's valuing the Blazor community and how he's been away from C# for 11 years, and Blazor's brought him back into doing .NET development. So I thought that was a really interesting piece of information because Blazor's, kind of reinvigorating the community, at least for some people, to come back and explore C# again. And in the case of Bruno, he's found that there was a lot of really cool stuff happening, and he's excited about not only the community, but C# and the ASP.NET space again. So I thought that was really cool. It's worth checking out what he had to write about his findings coming back to the community after 11 years. So I'll post that in my show notes later today. Also, last week on the show, we had a lot of hangs building our Blazor projects. And I was at Tech Bash this week and watching Scott Hunter on stage with some Blazor demos as well, and he was experiencing the same thing. So I talked to Scott, and we looked at the GitHub repo for Blazor, and turns out this is a known issue. So Visual Studio hanging has something to do with VS 15.8.0, and it'll be fixed in the next point release of Visual Studio. So we can see that go away from now on, though. If this hangs on you or me, you can go into the debug menu and hit cancel build, or the build menu, hit cancel build, and it should get that out of that lock state. So last week I was shutting down Visual Studio quite a bit to try to clear that out, but we can do that just a little bit easier until we wait for that update to come. So that's good news. Great article this week in Visual Studio Magazine. I know some of you are new to Blazor. Most of us are. A few of you are contributors to community projects and whatnot, so some of this might be repetitive news, but it's a really good in-depth opinion piece on what's shipping in ASP.NET Core 3.0, which will be Razor components, and it goes over things in really great detail. I thought it was a great read, especially if you're trying to inform like coworkers and things that haven't heard of Blazor before. This is a really good overview of everything, and shed some light on what's actually shipping soon. So I thought that was really, really good stuff. And one of the things I wanted to highlight in conjunction with that is this GitHub issue that I found. Since the Razor components is coming in ASP.NET Core 3.0, one might speculate that the next set of releases that we see might revolve around that part of the framework. And it looks like at least some of that's true here, where somebody is asking to have some better retry logic when we lose connection to server-side Blazor projects or Razor component projects. And it looks like they would like the ability to fail over to, say, another server if there's an issue. So it looks like more SignalR support might be something that's coming in the next release, in the 0.7.0 release. So I think that's something that we'll be looking forward to, and see more of the server-side support stuff come until that ASP.NET Core 3.0 ships with Razor components. So I'll keep my eye on this and see if any more issues get flagged as a 0.7.0 milestone, and we'll keep you up to date on those. So all those things I'll put into some show notes. I usually have these ready to go and already up on my website by the time I start live streaming, but I just got back from Tech Bash. It was an amazing conference with lots of great people that I got to meet and talk to, but it let me slip behind a little bit in prep for the show. So I'll have those up as soon as the show ends. I'll write those up and get them up today so everybody can click through links and find the resources and get busy. So let's do some coding demos. Last week I demoed some 0.6.0 template features, which kind of preempted some other things that I wanted to talk about. Those things would be Blazor-Fluxor, which is a Redux type of kind of recreation of Redux in Blazor. This is by Peter Morris, which he jumped on Twitter with me the other day and helped me get a better understanding of what it does and some really cool features that it has. So I want to give him a shout out and say thank you for helping me prep for the show. I think everybody's going to benefit that's watching from the information that you gave me the other day. So thanks a lot for that. And then we're also going to look briefly at Biomon, which is a piece of the Bionic framework, which is a copy of the Ionic framework for Blazor. So one of the really cool features of it is there's a tool called Biomon, which is a monitoring tool that does live reloading when you make changes to your project and do builds and make changes to your static files and things like that. So I'm going to try to demo that as well in conjunction with some of Peter's project, and so we'll take a look at state management in Blazor and see how we can create some really cool stuff and see how we can improve our development cycle by using Biomon. So we'll check those two things out. So let's get started. I'm going to do a file new project. So I'm going to start from scratch today. I have looked at some of these things in some vague detail, and like I said, Peter helped me with some of this too. I didn't want to start completely from ground zero, not knowing anything at all. I just wanted enough information that I could help kind of bootstrap this process and get us into some code real quick. So I'm just going to create a new project here. We'll do StateHasChanged 3. I don't have to remember that 3. Last week that one caught me a few times with my namespaces. But we'll do StateHasChanged 3. And we're going to start with the client-side Blazor project. We don't really need a whole lot of stuff. We're just going to do some real basic demos today and learn about this new Flexor framework from Peter Morris. So cool stuff here. We'll get this project up and running. Scott Hunter said that the experimental label is going and being removed from Blazor. Course status. Okay, I'll check this out. So Peter just popped a link in Slack here. Live from Tech Bash. Yeah, I'm wondering if this was a slip. I don't see Scott Hunter actually replying here. And I think I'll ask him to clarify. Because I know him well enough that I can get him to elaborate a little bit more on this. I think he might have been speaking about Razor components. So don't get your hopes up that the WebAssembly stuff will have the experimental tag lifted soon. Yeah, Bruno, yeah, I agree. I had just talked to him about this very subject the night before, and he was pretty adamant that it wouldn't happen within this year, and it would probably be something that we might see like 2020 timeframe. So I think he was speaking about Razor components, but got a little bit cloudy on the messaging. So I'll ask him to clarify, and I'll either put it in the show notes or I will address it on the next show. So I will reach out to Scott Hunter and see what's up with that. So I've got my new project spun up here while we were having a good chat. Thanks for the link, by the way. It was it's good to address that type of stuff. If you guys have anything else, any other questions you'd like me to answer, please feel free to put those in the chat. I'll do my best. So I've got my new project spun up. Haven't made any changes to this yet. Just did file new project. Just trying to get my windows right here. Get my Solution Explorer up and running. Now you might see me jump through hoops to get to my command line. This is just how I roll. I don't know. I don't like the command line that comes out of here. So I'll just do, I guess I could customize it. I'm just lazy. I haven't. So I could pop this guy open. This isn't my command line I like to work with. I like to do this, even though I'm going through extra steps here. I'm going to do open file in File Explorer because this gets me to my path. And like I said, I'm kind of lazy. And I do CLI from here. I'm running conemu. I mentioned this on the first show that I did. I love conemu, and it jumps me into PowerShell, and I have lots of little plugins that run, like this thing that displays my GitHub status and stuff like that. So I'm going to jump into my console, and let's go check out Biomon. So go back, get my browser up again here, and then let's go find Biomon. I'm going to go to let's see. I'm going to go to my website and find this because I don't remember exactly where to find the Biomon stuff. When I do searches, Google's still not really great at handling Blazor searches. You get things about clothing, which is annoying. And I put this in my show notes last week, and that Bruno, thank you. He's got the link right here in chat. Thanks for joining, by the way, guys, that created this stuff. It's really cool to have you in the chat room helping out and answering questions for folks and things about these awesome tools that you guys are making. So the community around this has been really great so far. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through the install process because I already have it, but I'm going to show you how it works anyway. I'm not going to install the entire Bionic framework right now, but I do want to check out this monitor piece. So we'll go copy the install Bionic monitor from the docs here. And by the way, Peter and Bruno, the guys that are making these frameworks have done an excellent job documenting these things. And documentation matters, especially with this new stuff. .NET tool install. Oh, I somehow typed a caret in there. Get that guy out. So we'll do .NET tool install global Bionic monitor. Now, if you're not familiar with what .NET tool install is, with ASP.NET Core and the .NET CLI, we now have the ability to install tooling. So these are actually executable files that get brought down to your machine, and they're in a special directory, and they're given a global path, so we can access those really easy. And that's what Bionic Monitor is one of these global tools. So as you can see, I've already installed it. We could actually do this as well. We could say on install. We could take it out. It's just that easy to add and remove .NET tools. So we'll go ahead and add that back, download that tool, and install it back in the system. You see these take just a couple seconds to install. They're pretty quick. I've got a lot of network stuff going on with the show here, so it might take a second for it to get back installed. There it is. And I've got bugs attacking me again. I can't wait till summer's over, guys, because the flies and stuff that come in the summer here just suck, and they attack me while I'm trying to stream, and it's really annoying. So Bionic Monitor is installed. I want to point this out before I run the tool. I'm going to go into my index page, and part of the way that Bionic Monitor works, I'm in Kentucky, by the way, the Louisville area of Kentucky. So it's still fall, or early fall here. We've had a couple cold days, but not enough to like get rid of all the fun insects and stuff that come with summer. So they always want to just like get up in my face while I'm talking on the live stream for some reason. So on our index, there's a requirement for SignalR for this, because SignalR is going to tell our web page when to refresh when there's been a change to either our static files or to our binaries. So when we do a build, or if we're updating CSS, Bionic Monitor is going to signal with SignalR to tell the browser, hey, you need to refresh, there's a new version of the app available. So you will see in this link section here some resources added when we start doing this. So I'm going to do Biomon, and let's see. It's not configured as a Bionic project. Oh, I might be in the wrong directory. I am. So I wasn't in the actual application directory. So let's try that again. Biomon. And this should actually update my files for me. We could actually see that happening at the very beginning of this here. It says injecting, so it's putting those resources that it needs, and then we're spinning up our application. And I think this happened to me the other day, Bruno, where the initial run of this would hang. I had to come back, yes, to all, and I had to do a rebuild in here before it would work properly. I'm not sure if that's just me being me, or if there's something with the tool that requires that to happen. So we'll do a rebuild. Let's see if that fixes the situation. Still not quite there. Let's close that guy back out, and we'll give it one more try here. Let's actually try, see if we're still running. We are. Let me try killing it and redoing it. Biomon will only detect changes but not build the code for you. Okay, so I might have misunderstood what was happening at the beginning there. So I didn't have a proper build yet, so Biomon couldn't detect the changes and reload the page, but it does not kick off builds for you. So now I've built the project. Now Biomon can monitor the binaries and the static files to reload this the page here if we make changes. So let's tinker with this a little bit. Let's try to split the screen just so we can kind of get an idea of what's happening. And I'll open up my CSS here. And let's just make a quick tweak to the CSS just so we can see what's happening with Biomon. And I'll do background color. This should be a relatively easy change. This will change the background to black. So I'm going to save this. I'm not going to go back into Visual Studio and do anything, and then boom, my application updates, my CSS gets updated, and now my application is refreshed. What I love about tools like this is I like to build prototypes and iterate very quickly, especially when I'm doing CSS work. So I will open up something like Biomon, and then I will churn through my CSS and make a bunch of changes, and then watch them display on the right-hand side. Often I'll be in my Chrome debug tools like this, and I'll be messing around with CSS in here, and then I'll copy them back over and save them, and then watch it all update again on this side. So I have like this workflow that I'm used to. I do a lot of prototyping. I showed GenFu on the last show. So the combination of GenFu and magic reloading like this and editing CSS code, like that is my jam right there. I'm going to take this out. I don't want this to be black. It's going to be terribly hard to read what we're going to do. So we'll save this. I may have fat fingered something. Nope. Okay, cool. So that should go back to normal. Notice it's automatically reloading there. Let's see. Is there anything else I need in the documentation? I don't think I do. Like I said, it's great docs, Bruno. It was really easy to get started and understand what was happening here. One little piece of feedback I'm glad you're here for. One little thing that you might consider adding here is just a little comment at the top that says something like inserted by Biomon or something like that. Just so people know if they didn't catch that message, Yeah, I understand you could use different directory as well, but if you're editing somebody's code like this, these type of things help to understand where it came from if you didn't catch it when it was happening, or maybe you didn't read through the docs 100%. Kind of guilty of that myself. Don't always read everything I should. So if you see, that that's in there, or maybe even if something's not working properly, and you might go look for, okay, that piece is missing, or maybe if I need to remove this at production time or something, it's helpful to see those things. So that helps point it out. Just a little nice have. Let's see. So there's stuff in here about using different directories, kicking off help. Really well done. I saw if you want to post, Bruno, if you still have the videos that you created on this, I'll link to those in the show notes as well, because I found those very helpful. I don't know where to find them. I got them out of Gitter, I believe. But Bruno actually has videos like tutorial style to show you how all these things work. And they're very helpful in understanding what the tool does. And there's things where you can host on different ports and stuff like that I thought was really cool. I won't have time to get into on the show. It's on this page. Check the updates. Let's see here. Let me scroll down. I don't know if I'm looking in the right place. But there are video tutorials out there, and all right, cool. We got links here. Check updates page. I was on the wrong page, I believe. All right, cool. I will put these in my show notes, and we'll make sure we get these in there for everybody that wants to see them. Let me grab I lost my notepad here. I want to make sure I have all these notes ready for you guys when the show's over. So get this guy up and running. There we go. Now I can take some notes if you guys have questions or anything like that I don't get to answer. All right. Get this guy out of my way. All right, cool. So again, videos on Bionic are up there. They're really good, really detailed, very insightful. So I won't cover everything on the show. It's already up there. You guys got it right from the source of the creator of the framework. So let's go back into our project. I don't need any more docs or anything. We'll go ahead and close this guy out. Biomon is still running. I closed my window. Gotta make sure I kick this back off just in case I don't remember to spin this back up. Okay, cool. So that's monitoring what we're doing. I didn't get to show that it will kick off after a build. So let's do that real quick. Last little Biomon introduction here. Let's go into our solution. And we'll go to our, not index HTML, but pages, our index page. So this is our index page, and we could say, instead of hello world, we'll say state has changed 9. We're in October now. Gosh, I am October 6th. I can't even remember what day it is. These trips really screw me up. So I hit save. I Control S, and I didn't build yet. So I saved, but I didn't build. As soon as I build, and we've got a successful build, and there it goes. I didn't have to do any refreshes or anything on my own. So the application is up to date, and we're displaying the name of the show and the date that we recorded. So this is really, really cool and really helpful. Currently, if you do a Control F5 without Biomon, anytime you refresh the page, it will kick off a build. So it's kind of like a pull. Biomon's more like a push. So it just depends on how your workflow is. But I like this. This is really, really neat stuff. And we'll keep it running while we do these the next bits here. So I've got Biomon working, and now I want to talk about state. So in the application, we have this counter. This is the default file new project experience with Blazor, and we have this counter that we can click and it increments the count. So let's go ahead and look at the code for the counter. And in the code for the counter, I'm going to try to explain this in detail. I know, especially Bruno and Peter, you guys have seen this before. You're pretty experienced with the new template, but there's plenty of people out there that have never seen Blazor. So we'll go over what's exactly happening here. We've got a button and a field. So we have current count, which is data binding to this field inside of our functions here, inside our Razor functions template. And it says current count equals 0. So we're going to have a default count of 0. And that gets displayed in our HTML of the component. We also have a button that's bound to increment count. When we click increment count, it does exactly that. It calls this void method, and it takes current count, and then it just increments that value that's in this field. That gets displayed on the counter page. So the counter page, even though it's a page and it has the page directive with a route, which gives us this /counter URI, what we can do with this is this whole piece is actually a component. So we could come out to our index page. I'm going to remove the survey here. We don't need a survey. And we can say counter. And this will give me another counter. So I'll build. And so far we've got 2 successful builds without Visual Studio locking up. Must be a good day. And immediately Biomon's refreshing our page for us. And we can click count. We have a count of 4. So remember that. We have a count of 4. On my home page, I have another counter component. And it has a count of 0. So these 2 components are working independent of one another. Notice when I navigated back, this actually went back to 0. So the state of the counter component is not persisting anywhere except for this instance right here when I'm looking at it right now. So what if I had something on my home page, not even another counter component, but what if I had another component that was completely different, and I wanted to use the value of what is in the count? So say I want to persist this value on my home page somewhere, whether it's in another component or something like that. That's what I want to accomplish. And that's actually something that's, it can get fairly difficult to do without a nice method of doing it. There are some other examples out there. I know there's the Flight Finder, and it has some state management, but very simple state management is exactly that. It's simple. It's going to break down after you start getting more and more complex things happening in your application. You can get spaghetti code. You can have conflicts where multiple things are overwriting each other by accident. And what we want to do is reduce defects in our applications. We want code that it's easily testable and we know exactly what's happening. It's easy to reason about. So we're going to work with this and do exactly that. We're going to create code that's more easy to reason about and understand what's happening so we don't create bugs. And eventually I'll use Flexor to do that. And on my home page, let's go ahead and take this out. So I don't need 2 counter components. But what I think I want to do here is when I create or when I increment my counter, I want to have a way to consume that on another page. I'm going to save this so all of my changes are saved. And then I'll create, let's do a paragraph. Let's say counter, or how do I want to phrase this? Let's do an H2 tag. H2, and we'll do counter state, counter component state. So we're going to just say this is my counter component state, and just like on the counter itself, I'll just copy this. We'll say current count, and we'll put that count there. Now I can't bind to current count because it's not in scope. This current count is actually in the counter itself. So let's do this and just kind of comment it out for now. We'll just put in TBD. So this is what we want to do. So let's build this guy out, and we'll take a look at what it looks like running, just so we have an idea of how it's changed right now. So I'm wiping this counter off my home page, and so I have the hello message, then I have the counter component state, and I want to display the count. So if I come over here, obviously the home page isn't going to change. I'm going to count to 6, come back, still, obviously, we're not binding there. It says TBD. Let's see how we can solve this problem. And to solve this problem, we're going to use Blazor-Fluxor. So let's go into our resources here, or our web here, and find the resources. I think probably the easiest way to find this by just memory is to go to blazor.net and then go on to community. There's a lot of really great stuff in here, and Blazor-Fluxor is in here. There's other really great libraries, which I talked about a couple of these in some of the earlier episodes of StateHasChanged. But Blazor-Fluxor is right here. We can jump right to it. We have all the documentation here. And I'll put links in the show notes as well. So installation, we can actually get this from NuGet. So let's see, this is up on NuGet. If you're a command line guru, you can do install through package manager in the console. I'm a GUI type of guy. I'm going to go into my dependencies and do manage NuGet packages. And then I'm going to browse for it. And we'll do Blazor.Fluxor. Oh, come on. Let's try that. There we go. That's interesting. I typed in Blazor.Fluxor. It didn't find it. It did with a space. So I don't know where it's indexing and searching, but apparently it needed it with a space. So there's our Blazor-Fluxor. Another shout out and thank you to Peter Morris, the creator of this, is he updated to 0.6.0, which just released a couple days ago. So thanks for getting that updated so we could check out Blazor-Fluxor with the latest bits of Blazor. So we install this guy. We'll sign our life away. So I think my firstborn child, we just gave that away by clicking OK there. ESLint encountered a parsing error. Okay, that's interesting, but we still installed successfully, so I don't know what ESLint's crying about, but we're good. We have our dependency. We'll just double check here. NuGet, there we are, Blazor-Fluxor. And then we have some really good documentation we can follow. Let's go back to that. We're going to start with this first sample project. So under sample projects, we have the counter sample. And this is walking us through exactly what we need to do to set up Blazor-Fluxor. And I think on the window, I don't know, if you guys can't see or read these things very well, let me know. I can bump this up. That might help for the stream. I think you guys have a little bit lower resolution than me, so we'll pop that text up a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is initialize a store. So the Flexor framework follows this Flux pattern, which I guess kind of is an old thing, but it got reinvigorated with the React community. So you can actually read a lot about this pattern by doing a search for React Flux, for example. And there's like videos and stuff on the pattern. Usually it's using it with React, but there's some good explanations of the pattern, because the pattern actually follows a simple design pattern that helps you understand what exactly all of these new definitions mean. So we have things like a store, which is going to be the main place where our state is being stored. And then we have our views and actions. The views are basically what is displaying the UI, and then we have actions which trigger our dispatcher and callbacks to manipulate some sort of data and push it into the store. And this is all a one-way data flow, so it's not like two-way data binding where we're allowing this two-way communication. This is actually a good diagram of it here. So we have this one-way data flow. CQRS for, yes, it's very similar to the command query responsibility pattern. I mean, a lot of these things that we see in software development are rehashes of old ideas. I would say it's very similar to that. It's also similar to like a pub sub type of a pattern. So we have this type of a workflow here, and it's unidirectional. So we're pushing things into our store, and we're doing it in a way that is immutable. So I like immutability. I like functional programming because it lets you understand exactly what's happening in your app. It may take a little bit more work to get some things done programmatically, but at the end of the day, if you can reason about what's happening in your code, that few extra minutes it takes you to get up and running is well worth it when you need to troubleshoot bugs or just not have as many bugs. So you get better testability, reliability, especially in multi-threaded scenarios where multiple things are interacting with one set of store. I'd be hard-pressed to think of some way which is not CQRS, says the creator of the, says Peter, the creator of Flexor. So yeah, it's very similar to command query responsibility. So let's go back. Now we kind of hashed out what it is. Let's see some of it in action. I learn better by example than I do by looking at a diagram. So the first thing we need to do is implement this middleware. So there's some requirements for JavaScript from the possible third-party libraries. So I don't know exactly what goes on behind the scenes of store.initialize. Peter, I don't know if you have documentation that elaborates more on this, so I don't quite get exactly what it does, but I do realize that it helps me support third-party JavaScript that may be required by other components and things I use. So I'm going to go into my client project and open up my main layout. So I need to make sure this is in my main layout. So I'm going to put store.initialize, and I think I forgot a using statement in here as well. So I need to inherit from Blazor layout components. Oh, sorry, I'm already doing that. I need to inject this Flexor interface store and tell it to resolve store. Boom. So there's where our store is going to come from. It's coming from dependency injection. So I'm saying to this this component, this layout component, to when it sees an iStore to new up a brand new store for me, and we're going to call initialize on that store. So that's our very first thing that we need to do. We added the store initialize. So this will initialize the store and inject any required JavaScript. So I'm assuming it's injecting some JavaScript that it requires too. So remember, Blazor has a interop framework that it relies on for a lot of things right now because WebAssembly just doesn't have a whole lot of features. So WebAssembly is a big part of Blazor, but JavaScript still is as well. So there are a lot of JavaScript abstractions that allow us to write C# code and not worry about the JavaScript that's happening underneath, which I'm fine with. So store.initialize will return a render fragment, and all it does is basically insert any JavaScript that the middleware libraries require, none by default, so that it's not doing any by default. When the document loads in the browser, it initializes the store's initial state. Okay, cool. So thanks for the clarification, and we will now automatically discover our automatic discovery of store features. So we need to go into our services and set up our Flexor service. So let's go into startup.cs, and we'll say using Blazor Fluxor. And then we need to configure the service in here. And these copy and paste got messy. I'm going to line this guy up a little better. So we've got add Flexor. We're passing in options, and we're setting up dependency injection, and we're telling Flexor to use or inject this on our application. So we've got that. Next thing we need to do is add state. So we're going to start setting up our store. The store is going to be our gold standard of what the state in our application is. So this is the end-all be-all of what state is in our application. We should always go to the store to get this state, and we should always push our values into the state. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but we need to get the states or the store set up so we can start storing the state of our application. So in the client project, we'll start with a folder named store. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a new folder. And we'll call it store. And we'll, in our store, create a counter folder. So we're going to separate these out by feature. I messed around with this the other day, and I threw them all in one file. But if you're going to work with a bigger project, this is kind of more of a organized way of doing it. So we'll do this for the show here. We'll do counter. So we have a counter feature. Let me get this out of the way. And now we need to add a state class. So we'll create a new file named counterstate.cs. And this will represent how we're going to store state in our application. So we'll do add new class. And we'll call it counterstate.cs. And here is our state class. And then, let's see, we need to give it a click count property. And the the counter state. So this is where we're going to hold our state for our counter component. So when we add this state to our project, we're going to pass in the click count, and then click count will become that value. So click count is our backing property for that field. So this is holding the actual number of our counter, and then counter state is how we're going to update that value. All right, so now we need to add a feature, and we're going to call the feature counter feature, and it's going to be a feature of counter state. So I need to add another class. And this might seem like a lot of work to do exactly what our component already does, but in the end it will make sense, I promise. So just hang in there. So we're going to set up this counter feature. So we'll call it counter feature.cs. And we can just paste over that class name so we don't end up with two of them. There we go. So we have a counter feature, and notice we got some red squigglies. We need to do an import here using Blazor-Fluxor. That'll clear that up. So control period to get that import statement up here, or this using statement. So using Blazor-Fluxor. So we're going to have a feature of counter state, which the counter state we just created. So that's our counter state here. So we're saying this is a counter feature of that type. And then we have the name. We're going to give the state or the store feature a name. And then we're going to say counter state and give it an initial value. So we'll say get initial state equals a brand new counter state of 0. So this is initializing our defaults for the counter state. So again, this is going to be an immutable thing, this counter state. So every time we change the value of it, we're gonna do something like this. We're gonna say new counter state and pass in the value of it. So we're always creating a new object and initializing the value of it and pushing it into the store. All right. So we've got all that. And then we're going to create, let's see, we're displaying the state in the UI. So we want to go back to our counter, and we're going to start displaying the data here. So we need to inject some we're going to do some dependency injection, and we're also going to register some dependencies on the page itself. So we'll go copy those out and go to our counter component. And we'll put those up here at the top of the file. So we're using Blazor-Fluxor. We're using our store counter. And then we're resolving a dependency for counter state as our counter state that we created for our application. All right, so we've got those set up. And then we need to change the current click to this counter state dot value click count. So in here, instead of binding to the current count that is called out in our function down here, we're going to put a reference to the counter state that we've registered through dependency injection. So when a new counter component gets newed up, it's going to inject this counter state object. So it's going to instantiate a counter state. And then instead of displaying what was down here in current count, we're going to go to that state and then get the value from it and display the click count instead. Again, we'll tie all this together in just a few minutes here and get an idea of why we're doing all this work to replace that counter component's guts with all this extra code. So I need to go and create an action. So we need an action that is responsible for updating the state of our store. Again, we're following the Flux pattern here, and they call these dispatchers. So the dispatcher is going to be in charge of how that state is represented or changed in our component store, or in our application store. So let's go ahead and create this guy. We're going to make a increment counter action. Let's go back to our project. We want to go to our store and our counter feature and add a new class. And this one is going to be increment counter action. And then we'll go ahead and paste over this. It's going to inherit from an it's going to implement the iAction interface. And then I believe in this example, nothing happens inside of this action. Or maybe I'm thinking of the next step. So I did look at this a little bit earlier, and it is, oh, let's see, iAction. Yeah, in this case, we don't need any actions because we're just incrementing the number by 1. But if we had additional business logic that was required while we're updating the state of the value, we would do it in here. So say if we click the button, it needed to do validation or some other type of rules, we could abstract some of the business logic into this. Maybe we needed to multiply the value by 10 and do some math on it or something like that. Code never happens in the action, so I'm being corrected. This is, if code never happens in the action, then I'm kind of confused what the action is doing. Is it more of a trigger for other things to happen in the application? Just a holder for property values. Okay. I will have to read up a little bit more on this then. I'm a little confused as to why it's required just for property values, but we'll take a look at that later. Let's do the next step here. Let's go to our component and we'll add the dispatcher. It identifies the class you want to do. It'll make more sense in a minute. Okay, cool. So we'll try to answer questions here in a few, because the more we go through this, the more it will make sense. So we're going to add the dispatcher now to our component. And then, okay, so actually I don't have these in the right order. I'm going to make sure, I don't think the order matters here, but I will move these around just in case. Some dependency injection frameworks can have an order of operations where if multiple dependencies register each other, then sometimes the order does matter. So I'll make sure that we're in the same order as the documentation, just not to screw anything up. So we have these all set. Now increment count is going to signal that dispatcher. So we're going to replace this increment count with our dispatcher and tell it to invoke the action or do or pass in to dispatch the increment counter action. So we'll do that. And then now we need a reducer. Maybe this is where I was confused. Okay, order is irrelevant in this situation, Peter says. This may have been where I was confused earlier, Peter. The reducer, is this where the business logic goes? If you can answer that for me. If there were additional things that we want to do business logic-wise, the reducer is what is in control of those business logic operations. Yes, all right. I'm a total noob at the pattern, so I'm trying to get the idea of how it all works too. So we're all learning together, which is what's great about these streams. Let's do, at least I'm glad we've got Peter here to make sense of this and answer questions, because as I'm learning and you guys are learning with me, it's nice that we're getting accurate information. And we're correcting things as we go, at least the things I'm saying wrong. So Peter says the action is like the method name and the parameter values, and the reducer is the code of the method. Gotcha. Cool. So we need to implement a reducer here. So this is going to be our increment counter reducer. So this is our guy that's in charge of doing the business logic. And let me redo that. All right. So we have a class called increment counter reducer, and it is inheriting from reducer. We'll add the using statement. And the reducer is of type counter state and increment counter action. So when we override the counter state and call reduce, we'll pass in the counter state and the increment counter action, and then we'll return. And again, this is being immutable here. We're going to return a new counter state, and we'll take the current state and we'll increment it by 1. So we're creating a brand new counter state by using the value of the current state and adding 1 to it. So we're not manipulating the state directly and saying click count plus 1 directly. We're creating a brand new counter state and giving it the value that we've calculated. So we could have complex business logic in here. So we'll save this. And again, we're at the end here, so this should really help make sense here in just a minute. Let's make sure I got everything, all my ducks in a row. The rest of this is explaining what all of these things do. So I should be able to go back to my counter. Let me make sure I saved all my pages here. Let's close all but this. I should not need my count or current count equals 0 anymore. So we can get rid of that. It's not being used. I don't know if that was in the docs and I skipped over it, but we don't need it, so we'll get rid of it. And then we can rebuild our app. Let's hope everything goes to plan. Build started. All right. Visual Studio is working properly with us today. This is awesome. So our application refreshed thanks to the Biomon. Now we can go into counter and look at this. We have our counter still going. Again, there was a whole lot of code to do exactly the same thing that it was already doing, but watch this. First, we'll go back to the home page. Our counter component state, we still haven't implemented anything here, so we're not fetching the store state out of the store and displaying it yet. So we don't know what the current count is, but we still have state here, so our state hasn't changed from 8. Remember at the last demo we did of this, when we bounced from route to route, the current count stayed at 0. So now we can do cross-component and cross-page communications. So let's go to our index page, and where we have current count to be determined, actually let's go to our counter. So I'm lazy, I don't want to type this again. I can just take the same value here. Remember, we couldn't do this before because it was out of scope. And we could say current counter state dot value click count. Now notice we have the squigglies here. That's because we need a couple more things. We need to inject the state, and here I'll copy the whole block. We'll paste this up top. What we actually need is we don't need any of this. We just need these two. So we need Blazor-Fluxor. Oops, maybe we do need that other one. Nope, not the dispatcher, the store. We need these 3. There we go. So we need Blazor-Fluxor here. We also need our store counter, which contains our counter state object or type. And then we can inject the counter state to the page. Right, so I'll get to the responses in the chat here in just a sec, and we'll do, this will work now. So we have counter state.value, click count. Let's build. So we're running our build. I think we finally got one to hang. So this was the issue I was talking about at the absolute beginning of the show. There's currently an issue with Visual Studio 15.8 that Blazor builds hang. So we'll go into build and hit cancel. And it'll tell us when it's finished canceling. I don't know what causes the build to hang like that, but apparently the Blazor team knows and it's being fixed. So we don't need to really worry about it. We just need to kick off another build. Let's hope the second build works. It doesn't. Yep, there it goes. Okay. So now the build is running. Again, Biomon's working in the background, so this will refresh itself. Now we have current count equals 0. We can go into counter. We can uptick the counter. Let's do 6. Look at this. Current count is 6. Now we have state that we can view across the application. So we can have, say, another component on this page that is accepting the state of 6 and reacting to it in some way. So now we have that cross-component, cross-page communication. So this is really cool stuff. It took a little bit of extra work, but now we have a system in place that is got a good pattern behind it. That's going to help us abstract business logic and put it where it belongs and follow this nice pattern and keep us out of hot water with the immutability aspect of it, so we don't actually accidentally have two components that overwrite the state by accident. So if you picture a large application, you might have multiple things interacting with a value. You might forget that there's something in that process needs to happen before a certain state gets changed. You may have somebody clicking a button and accidentally overriding some type of value that wasn't supposed to be written to. So we've got some comments here. Let me go through. So while I was writing this out, Peter said, if you want to understand actions better, try adding public read-only amount to the action and its constructor. We'll take a look at some more ideas with this application in just a minute. So maybe we'll do that. ADEF web server says this is something he would use, or he or she would use. It's very cool. I know I'll definitely be using this for some stuff, and we'll do some experimentation here in a minute. And I'm not done yet. Like, there's some more cool stuff to show you, and I'm really glad that Peter jumped on Twitter the other day and identified some of the cool stuff it can do, so we can look at some more awesome examples. What is the advantage when compared to Redux or Mobix or Mob10? I don't know how to pronounce that. Bruno's got that question answered in the chat. He says Redux is a library that is based on the Flux pattern, which is very similar. Okay, I don't know if I've heard of MobX or Mob10 or whatever that is. These are again, they're older patterns that have probably been in other languages before, but as of recent, these are JavaScript front-end framework patterns. And myself, I haven't had to rely on anything for that much complexity, so I've done jQuery and Angular development and things like that, and I've never really dealt with Redux before, so I can't really compare for myself here. Somebody is converting Mobx. Is this Mob10 or MobX, or am I pronouncing it wrong? I don't even know how to pronounce that. MOB capital X. So somebody's converting that to Blazor as well, says Bruno. So I'm glad to see this discussion happening in the chat. This is good stuff. Let's take, excuse me, while you guys are hashing this stuff out in the chat, excuse me, throat got real dry there. I'm going to skip temporarily. I might go back over this. We're already running up on an hour. I want to try to keep this within an hour, and we have some really cool stuff to look at still. So I'm going to skip the fetch data version of this demo. And I'm going to go straight into showing off the Redux tools for Chrome developer tools, because I thought that was just really cool stuff. And there's an integration point here. Let me start from let's see if it's in the docs here. Redux DevTools integration is where I'm going next. Now, let me back up. Let me slow down for folks that might just be joining us. We're looking at Blazor-Fluxor. We did getting started. We did the first sample project, the counter sample project, which I added just a tiny bit to by pulling out data from the store and displaying it on the homepage and syncing that with our counter component. And then I'm going to skip the effects sample, which if you guys do that on your own time, I'd suggest doing that. I don't think we'll have time for it today. But I'm going to skip right into this DevTools, Redux DevTools integration. There's a really cool debugger for Redux that is a Chrome plugin. So we're going to jump into this guy, and we're going to start this up. So the first thing we do here is let's click on this Redux DevTools. I'm going to open it in a new tab. This is in the Chrome Web Store. I've already added it, so it just has an add button up here if you haven't added it already. Let's do, I don't know if you guys can see these web pages real well, so we'll zoom in a little bit. There'd be a button up here that says Add to Chrome. Click that, and it installs this tool that comes up in the Chrome Developer Tools inside of your browser when you hit F12 DevTools. So this is we've got the tool installed, so you can see I have it's already installed. Now we need to add in hooks for the tool within our Blazor application. So that's what we're going to be doing in this tutorial. And again, great documentation. I love that everybody's doing this. I'm really bad at it. This is actually part of my job. So when I write my own stuff, I usually neglect this part of my demos and stuff, unless I really have time to invest, because this really takes a lot of time and it's very underappreciated. So we're going to go through this. We need to set up the project. Again, we're going to go back to the startup class, and we're going to add some things to our configure services method. We already have this in our method. We need to add some middleware. So we're going to add the Redux DevTools middleware and the routing middleware. So let's grab these out. We'll paste these in our startup CS. I mashed the delete button somewhere in there, trying to format. Make that. Oh. There we go. Boom. If you're newer to Visual Studio, what I just did there when I was moving this over, you can actually hold the Alt button, and you can drag and create boxes with your Alt button down, and you can do multiple line removal like that. You can also do really cool stuff like this. Whoops. You can fat finger the enter key, and no, you can do this, and you can actually hold Alt and highlight a section and type like this. These things come in handy from time to time, so if you see me creating these selection boxes, that's how I'm doing it. It's the Alt key that does that for you. There's something similar in Visual Studio Code. I can't remember off the top of my head how to do it, but it has to do with holding a key and clicking where you want your cursors, additional cursors to show up. Just a handy dev editing feature. And Peter Morris is across the pond, and he's telling me to say routing instead of routing. Sorry, buddy, not going to do it. I'm gonna keep the American English version of it, where we just sound like Neanderthals saying routing. So we've got our routing set up, routing middleware. Next step. Whenever somebody says routing, like I picture like a pig like rooting around for something. Control or Alt Control click is the Visual Studio Code command, right? Is that what you're referring to, I think? Yeah, it's super helpful. So in order for this to work, the implementation that Redux DevTools uses needs to be able to do serialization. So our objects in C# are going to get serialized into JavaScript objects. So we need to go into our counter state and give it a default constructor. So we can make it private. We can say counter state. We're not doing anything with it. I can copy and paste this, but for those of you not familiar with C# and Visual Studio, I'm going to show you a little shortcut. We can do CTOR, constructor, and then we can hit tab twice, and then boom, there's our constructor. We can also do this and change it to private. So there's that same piece of code. And we can clear out any of the empty space we want, like that, because it's not doing anything. So there we have our constructor. And then we need to subscribe to the state changes. So inside of, what part of our application does this go in? I just did this the other day. Oh, our Flux, anything that is a Flexor component. Ensure that the component is re-rendered. So all of our components. So we need to go into our counter component and inherit from Flexor component. So on because this is our view, we need to do that. And then we need to create this override method. So we need to subscribe to the state. And this is doing our state has changed for us. So we need to say on init, the name of your state is counter state. Subscribe, passing in this, and then we need to close off that. Okay. Oh, sorry, it's one or the other. So if we didn't want to do this, we could do this. So my bad. This is a RTFM moment. Read the freaking manual, right? So it's one or the other. So if we didn't want to do this and inherit, because sometimes we have other things that we need to inherit, and multiple inheritance is not a thing in C#. So if we had something we're already inheriting from, this gives us a way to declare it without inheritance. So we'll just use the inherit version of it for now. We'll save that. And then boom, that's it. That's all we need. We can rebuild. And this is a good sign. So we're not going to have to kill this build. Let's see. Epic Saint Jester says, I'm wanting to make a program that disables my Wi-Fi after a certain amount of time for certain devices. Any clue where I could get some reference material? Yeah, so this is kind of unrelated to what we're doing, but I will try to answer it the best I can. So what Epic Saint Jester is asking is, he wants a program to disable Wi-Fi for certain devices, I'm assuming on your network, at certain periods of time. So I think that is actually something that you probably wouldn't look at software to likely do. But I will say I have one of these. I'm not paid advertiser of them or anything like that, but I love it. It is a Ubiquiti Amplify router. EIFI router, Amplify router. I have one of these. It's this cute little square box, and in the settings for it, let's see here. I don't know if they have an image of the app in here. Kind of. So I don't know. It's in one of the tabs in the app under Family. You can actually set groups and windows of time to turn devices on and off. So it's a feature of the Wi-Fi router itself. It's terribly handy for if you have high school children and they want to make sure they don't have Wi-Fi after a certain time at night or something, so they're not sneaking out, and playing Xbox at midnight or something on a school night. So you can actually put all of the kids' devices into a group, and you can set a window of when those devices have access to the network. So this is a hardware-based thing, and I think you would need that. I don't know if you can do that through software, because the devices themselves are connected to the router, the Wi-Fi access point, whatever it is, directly. So I would look there. Look at your current router, see if it has, or as Peter would say, your router, and see if it has any features like that. But that's where I would look. So we rebuilt our project, and remember I went to Chrome Developer Tools and I installed this guy. Let's click on this. So this is really cool. This is the Redux DevTools, and in the Flexor framework, there are hooks to make this work. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go to counter. I want to pop this open. Can I do that without, is there a pin maybe? Pin it open? Did I click it too many times? I know I can do F12 and make this work, so I'll do that if I can't figure it out. I guess this is a way to just take a quick glance at it. Let's do F12 and click Redux, and no store found. I just saw it working. Come on. There it goes. So I had to refresh. So I've gone into my developer tools, and instead of looking at my source code or any of that stuff, I have this Redux tab. I can open this guy up, and now when I click my count, notice these, I guess you call them log points or something. They're popping up here. So these are actually events that happen in my timeline. So this is really, really just really cool. You have an actual event log here that you can go to and see what state your application has been in. And notice I'm on 5 right now, and it's showing my previous value was 4, and I've gone to 5. But if I go back here and I click jump, I can actually jump back to when that count was 1 and change to 2. And inside my application, I've actually gone back and looked into the past and seen what the values were. We can also grab the slider here and slide back, and we can replay events. So it's going back through and it's clicking and it's doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can see that. I skipped the fetch data demo, but if we had that enabled too, you could see the process of fetching data and binding that. So this is really cool, especially for debugging. I mean, it's mainly for debugging. Obviously, it's in the debugger tools, but can you imagine your application's not acting the way you expected it to? So you need to go back and see what has happened. You can actually go in step by step in here and see your state updating in this window here. And you can actually see the JSON representation of it. It's really cool stuff. So you can click on, Peter's saying, you can click on the tab on the left. Not sure where we're saying is the left, and then change the URL. Is it routing? Oh, so if we click through here, I think is maybe what you mean. I don't have, I'm not picking up a change there for some reason. Yeah, I don't think maybe I implemented the hooks for those. I'm not seeing it show up. So we should see, we've got it on this one here on counter. Is it because I don't have the, I'm not inheriting on my index? So do I need to do that maybe? Let's give that a try. So we'll do inherit, rebuild. So we can actually inspect our routing as well, is what Peter's trying to help me show off here. We'll reload our app. So let's go. There we go. Now it's showing up. So bounce between these guys. It was, and we can see where we've. Maybe it's because I was still looking at the historical state. So apparently I didn't need to add that, but it seems to be working now. So reloading the application at least did the trick for me. So I can replay that navigation even. So we can hit play here, and it's not updating the browser. So I don't know why. Jump. So we were on fetch data, and the browser's not keeping up. So maybe I'm doing it wrong. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not going. We should be seeing the routing happening. So we should be going from view to view like this. And for some reason, I'm not doing that. Is it because my timeline here? Try refreshing it again. Let's give it another shot. So I should be able to click through these and then go back, jump to it. There we go. I'm not clicking jump. That's what it was. So I can see the state of the routing even in the app. So I can do it that way. So I have to be in a live state for it to work like that. It still won't replay it though. That's interesting. It replayed the counter incrementing, but it's not working in this timeline for some reason. But it's something fun that you guys can install and play with and figure out how it all works out and how to debug with it. It's definitely something that I would use. I could see this being immensely useful to me. Oh, this is really cool too. I haven't gone through this either, but you get a nice graph of your state. So we can update like this, and you can see we've got our counter, and our click count has been updated to 6. So we can see a graph of our events happening and our state change throughout the application. This is really cool. So we've got different ways to inspect our data. Again, we can look at the raw JSON format. We can see this graph format. We can see the tree format. This is all really cool stuff. And Bruno says, great work, Peter Morris. Yes, definitely great work. This is immensely useful. It's one of the coolest things I've seen in Blazor in the last couple weeks come up. I mean, this is just really neat. So last week we looked at templates in Blazor 0.6.0. This week we looked at Biomon and Blazor-Fluxor. I might continue to edit this some more or do some more stuff. Let's see. Peter's asking, add the public read-only amount property to the increment. Okay, so let's play around with this a little bit more. And I've got a suggestion here from Peter to add public read-only int amount to the counter action. Oops, sorry, counter action. So public read-only int amount. So we're adding a field. Oh, should it be a field or a property? Should I do, oops. Amount and then read only, public read only, like that. What am I doing wrong here? This is got some kind of red squiggly here. Oh, it's not valid for this. It has to be a field. Has to be a field. Or no, I don't. Well, let's see. Yeah. So create a constructor. Yeah, we can't have read-only properties. You said add it to the constructor as well. So we would set the amount. Is that what you'd like me to do? Not sure I follow, so I'm trying to do what I can here. Parameter list constructor. Okay, so we don't even need that. Oh, parameterized instructor. Yeah, so like that. And then what would we do with this? Okay, this could be a property, but it doesn't matter. So I'm trying to figure out what would this help us with. Again, this is where I'm not try to build, watch it fail. I'm good at creating builds that fail. That's one thing I'm really good at. No argument given. Okay, so we need to give this a value because we haven't set this up. So what value should we inject here or add here? Pass in. Just put in a number. Okay, cool. Let's do that. And then there we go. So that satisfied it. So what is this of use for is what I'm asking, I guess. Edit the reducer. Okay. So now we have this action available to us in this. So we could do what? We could access that property, so we could have different actions that interact with this. Is this what we're doing? So we can kind of compose different scenarios here. So we could say click count equals +1. Let's do var value equals. It's a message that can carry values. Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting with this. So we could do value equals this, and we can say value equals let's see, plus equals action dot amount, and then we could write that to our state like that. Yeah, I think I did the same thing. I just did a little more verbose, so we could see if we can't break. I'm thinking we could add a breakpoint if we wanted to, but debugging currently doesn't work in Blazor. So yeah, same idea. So that should actually increment and then add 10. So it would go from 1, and if I clicked, it'd be 11. So let's run this guy. Yeah, so we're incrementing by 11 because of my logic, the way I wrote it out here. So we could actually shorten this up. If we want to do by 10s, we could do it this way, and then this, and just take this out. So do some refactoring, and exactly how you guys wrote it in the chat. We could say take that action amount and do it that way. So we could have, I can imagine we could have other actions or other values that we pass into the action, things like that. So that helps make sense of what an action is for. So the reducer takes the state and then any values that are in the action and does exactly what the method says and reduces them. So that's very cool. One or more reducers can react to the message and update their states. And so you can have multiple things listening and providing actions and reducing things. So you can kind of orchestrate what's happening to your state a little bit easier. It's a really cool pattern to follow, and gives you a lot of flexibility over how state's managed in your code. I love it. This is really cool. Another thing, think about this one, Peter. Since we are using a immutable state here, and we're newing up new objects, is there a way to access the store in a fashion where we have access to previous states? So similar to when we have our, let's see if I have my thing here. Is there a way that we could do this at runtime where we could look at previous states that we've had in our store? Is there a way to do that? So what I'm thinking is, since we're using immutable objects, and each time we update our state, we're passing in a new state, could we keep a queue of those so we could say, if I clicked a button and I wanted to do an undo, I could go back and pop off one of the states from the stack and then look at a previous object that was in there. So you could do middleware to do that. After you dispatch, you could serialize all state. So that would be a pretty cool thing to see. So I guess the idea would be in what I'm trying to say is maybe I have a form or something, and or say I have a grid of people and I hit delete and I didn't want to I accidentally deleted them and I didn't want to. I could click a undo button and then pop back into the state that had that user still. And apparently there's tools in Redux that do exactly that. So I'm sure there's examples out there that I could find and implement. That might be something I put together and do on a future show or something. I think that would show off some really cool, powerful features of Blazor and Flexor together. So to be able to like edit something and then undo the changes. I wouldn't write the app logic like that though. So pseudocode is not up to standards, Peter says. So this is super helpful. I will try to find more community projects to try to test out. I think this is going to be the focus of the show for quite a while. We're going to look at news, and we'll try to hack on some of the things that we find, because Blazor is brand new and there's lots of new frameworks spinning up, and there's lots of new features that will be added. We'll probably look a little bit more at the server-side stuff as that starts to become more relevant and we get towards the ASP.NET Core 3.0 release. So we'll probably look at that some more. One thing that's nice about that is there's debugging. And then let's see, what other kind of things might we cover on the show? I'll probably do some maybe CRUD operations, look at how to use Entity Framework. I'm really good with Entity Framework's in-memory database. I like to use that a lot, so we could check that out sometime. So I've got lots of ideas for the next couple shows. I am traveling again next week, so I am going to DevUp, and I actually am speaking at this event a couple times. So I'm going to DevUp in St. Louis. If you're in St. Louis, I think they still have tickets available. Go to devup.com, devupconf.org. Click register now if you want to go to that event. It's an amazing event. Come out and see all the awesome sessions. meet me in person. I'd love to hear what you're doing with Blazor and see what you think of it. There's lots of great sessions going on. I've got a session on Blazor. It's going to be the basics, like what is Blazor, how do you get started, what are the different project types, those sorts of things. I also have a session on functional programming with JavaScript. So I'm pretty handy with JavaScript as well. So I've got a session on that. And this is a event that's Tuesday and Wednesday. So I will be back from travel in time to do a show on Friday. So I plan on doing another State Has Changed on Friday of next week, which would be the 19th. Or nope, sorry, the 12th of October. So we should have another show on the 12th of October at the normal time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time. So keep an eye out for that. I do keep on my, I don't want to cross the streams. I do have a countdown on my Twitch stream that I try to keep up to date to show when the next show's coming up. So make sure you check that out. My website, edcharbonneau.com. I'll be posting some show notes here within the next probably 30 minutes to make sure everybody has links to what we talked about in the show today, so you can go try out the new bits and kick the tires and see what you can do with Blazor and Flexor and Bionic and Biomon and all those cool things that we talked about. I'll also put a link in the show notes again. I did this last week. There's a Gitter channel. So a lot of us are in the Gitter channel already. There's this Blazor Gitter channel. And you can come to the Blazor Gitter channel and talk about stuff that's happening in Blazor. I pick up some of my news from here. If you have a project that you're working on and you want to see it demoed on the show, ping me in Gitter or on Twitter, and I will keep those in mind for future shows. So we've got multiple ways to keep in touch. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter too. If you can manage to remember my name, it's on the Twitch channel. I go by on every service as my name. So Twitter, it's my first name, last name. On Twitch, first name, last name. So any of these places, that's the way you can find me. Even on GitHub, just my name. So feel free to reach out to me on any of those places, whether it's GitHub, Twitter, Gitter, and we'll keep bringing State Has Changed to the internet. Please make sure that you share the show with your friends if they're interested in Blazor. The more people we get watching, then the easier it is for me to have a reason to keep it going. So I want to grow this and get the word out as much as I can to people about Blazor. I think it's an amazing framework. It has a lot of potential, even though it's experimental. The more of us that get on it and start hacking with it helps the Blazor team find validation to make it a real thing. So like Pinocchio wants to be a real boy, we need to help it with that. Let's help them. Let's grow the show. Let's grow the community for Blazor. I also have a podcast. It's been neglected just a little bit lately because I've been traveling, but I have some shows lined up. So if you haven't heard my show, Eat, Sleep, Code, make sure you subscribe on iTunes or SoundCloud. I've got some shows coming up about Angular and React because we got new versions of those coming out. Just because I love Blazor doesn't mean I'm going to neglect the JavaScript community on my podcast. We got lots of cool stuff coming. I've got a lot of Microsoft people on the show, and there are amazing Microsoft MVPs and Google developer experts that I'm always in touch with, so we'll have them on the show as well, and make sure you give that a look. So I think that about wraps it up. Eat, sleep, code, and repeat. Yeah. So it's that's what I do. So that's where the podcast name came from. I eat, sleep, code, and repeat every day. even on the weekends, as you can tell. And even with a busy schedule, Monday I am driving a couple hours to get to DevUp and hang out with some really cool folks there. There's actually, I got to talk to some other streamers who I'm hosting on my channel. So click into my channel from time to time. You will see Jeff Fritz and Brendan. And I'm going to add some more as I find them in the Twitch community and host them on the channel. When you do what you like, that's what happens. Yeah. So I definitely enjoy what I'm doing. So I do it a lot. My work and my hobby are the same thing. So I get to enjoy what I do every day while I'm at work, which is not something that a lot of people have been able to say. So I'm very, very grateful of that. And we'll have some fun at DevUp. I don't know if anybody in the chat is going out to that. I know a lot of you are actually outside the US, so I know I won't be seeing you there. But if you have, if anybody in the chat room is going to be at DevUp in St. Louis, give me a shout and share the link for DevUp. So boom, there's DevUp. I'll put these in the show notes too. So DevUp will be a lot of fun. And then I will be in Bulgaria. If any of you guys in the EU want a really good conference to go to, DevReach. DevReach is in Sofia, Bulgaria in November. So I'll put this in the chat as well. I'll be speaking at DevReach on functional programming in C#. So if you want to come out to an amazing conference in a really cool city, DevReach is definitely a place to be if you're in Europe somewhere. There's going to be some Blazor sessions there as well. Unfortunately, I'm not giving those. We reserved, or DevReach reserved those slots for Microsoft folks who are talking about Blazor, which is completely understandable. I'd rather the Blazor information come directly from the team. So John Galloway will be at DevReach for folks that are in the EU region. If you want to come out and hear John Galloway talk about Blazor and also hang out and talk with them in person at some of the after party event stuff, that's where you can find both me and John Galloway. So some really great events coming up that we can talk to in person if you guys are able to get out to those areas. So if anybody has any more questions, I'll take them. If not, we'll wrap up and catch up next week after I get back from DevUp. Okay, so make sure you guys stop by my website for show notes. They'll be up probably within the next 30 minutes. And feel free to share those with friends that are interested in the show as well. And until next time, guys, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.